now that tattooing has become a widespread trend across different social media groups, do you feel it has led to a loss of artistic value, or has it amplified the art form?
Neither. I don't think. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it empowered some people, and it hindered others. And again, I think it all depends on the level of understanding that people had of their own practices and of that kind of world. So I don't think there's an answer to this. I've seen the most old school people thrive in social media and do extremely well, and I see Gen Z, people you would think were born with doing a little TikTok dance and still struggle to know to know how to navigate that. So I don't think it's just a complexification of the world we in, and there is a new level complexity, and it's not good or bad. It's about each person's ability to navigate it.
Makes sense. So, do you believe in a survival of those who adapt to change, or do you prefer to stay anchored to the strong roots of traditional tattooing? Because, like, from what you were saying, like, there's a lot of you stick to your vision, you make it for yourself, and you make it happen. And also, like, as we make the comparison before with doing merch and like selling your art to put it on t-shirt, etc., but like not being very sustainable on the long term or very commercially interesting or like business wise. I mean, is that why, for example, why you choose also to collaborate with Bleu? I mean, that you have a big passion for watches. You also do come from Switzerland and that region where watches are a big thing. What's your opinion on that?
That's the part I'm a little. I can obviously answer in terms of my own path. I don't think it necessarily applies to it. I think it's a bit hard. Like, I wouldn't really draw conclusions to apply to, in more general sense, because it's definitely like a very personal aspect of things. For me, so I started tattooing in my very late 20s, early 30s, which is late for a lot of people. But the reason why I did that is really is that tattooing came as, well, the main to a large extent, but among a range of different artistic expressions that I explored. And some I was more skilled or more sort of tuned into than others. Typically music, I've tried every type of thing that I enjoyed. I always liked to do the things I wanted to engage with, the things I liked. But clearly I wasn't born to become a musician. And so I did, and I tried, and it was fun, but it didn't become a thing. But still, for me, I didn't grow up in an artistic environment. And so for this reason, my hunger for culture and arts remained extremely abstract and quite, well, intellectualized or abstract for a very long time. And it blended with political activism. It blended with philosophy, or all kind of different, like, it was this sort of completely abstract thing. And so up until my mid-20s, it had been, this sort of abstract thing. So what happened is, when I started learning actual skills, I went to art college for graphic design and typography. I found, and before that, the first thing I engaged with like that was skateboarding. To me, it's cultural, is artistic in a lot of ways. And then
Graffiti and rap music?
graffiti. Well, yeah, and graffiti mainly. And it was interesting because skateboarding, I got pretty, decent at it, but I'm not really a sports person. I don't have a passion for sports. I enjoy watching it and I enjoy doing it, but I don't have a passion for succeeding in the sport, for like the performance aspect of things. So that was cool, but it didn't really lead up anywhere like that. Then then came graffiti, and that was completely different. That was like amazing. But the point is that those were very early, very kind of grassroots, very loosely codified type of things, and it was amazing. And what I realized is that I had to find in each different practice, I could channel a certain amount of the things I wanted to express, but not the whole of it, if that makes sense. And then there's some wiggle room, you learn the rules and then you see how far you can go. And then in space at a given moment, but also over time, there's there's more you can bring. But why am I saying all of this is because when I got to tattooing, obviously something clicked incredibly strongly there. But yet tattooing was one among other kind of practices where I put the most, of course, by very far, but still only a portion of all the things I was interested to approach, especially at a given moment. Over my career, I have maybe double, triple the amount of things I could express with tattooing. But nonetheless, it's never the whole thing. There's a ton of different aspects of expression that I'm interested in. Tattooing is often deep and serious and very universal themes, and there's a lot of gravitas to it. It's whereas I'm also, I love poetry, I love humor, I love extremely positive, extremely just joyful expressions. And that's not really, for me, tattooing is not really the best place for those kind of expressions. I'm still interested. I'm just making the point of the different things I'm interested to. And what I think, the way I think my life is this sort of working in spiral to progressively aggregate new forms of expression or expand new forms of expression without drifting away too much, just staying kind of consistent around a certain center, but progressively opening up and expanding my the level of things that I can express. But those have to go through an accumulation of different practices, different forms of expression, and with watches, getting involved with watches was relevant to me to a lot of different levels, passively at first, but then when I had the opportunity to do it actively, it fell perfectly in place because it did feel like perfectly complementary to what I had been developing with tattooing. And so that was, but if it had come a few years prior, maybe I wouldn't have felt that way. Do you know what I mean? So there's really this sort of thing. At that point, I had evolved in my practice of tattooing. I had opened my studios. I was in that kind of thing. So engaging with the watches was like the next piece of that puzzle. But all that, to say that I don't think it's necessarily relevant. Not everyone thinks like that, or not everyone functions like that. But I do think overall that, and I'm going back to what I was saying earlier about the comparison with photography. The more the more things evolve currently, the less clear boundaries there are between practices, the more sort of cross-pollination and sort of bleeding into different practices. So, for example, again, like when I went to art college, you would do cinema or you did photography. There was still photography, moving photography. Right now, you can do one or the other. It's really, I mean, sure, like this, people will have a focus, but there's no reason. Essentially, there's no material reason to stick to one. You can make a personal reason. You can have a personal reason to stick to one or the other, but there isn't a practical, physical reason to force people to stay in a specific silo. And the reason why I'm saying this is that it's a general trend. It's a general tendency of artistic practices, artistic expressions. And I think overall, there will always be some room for people who are practice focused and who are like, no, this is my practice. But we're moving to something that is approach focused and not practice focused. So progressively, as the lines between different practices are more blurred, the question is, what is your approach? What is your stance in general? What are you bringing into the game? And then, based on that, you will choose which practice corresponds and best conveys your approach. But that might change over time because your approach might evolve and you need to be able to switch very dynamically, but also the technical tools, the tools in general that correspond to your practice might evolve in a way that forces you to change or to simply shift. You know, if you're in visual arts, most people will be constantly dealing with digital tools. Those constantly evolve. Like you might download a new version of your favorite software and all of a sudden everything's changed around the fucking thing. And you're like, okay, well, like some things you used to like might not be there anymore. Maybe for a little while you can use an old version, but one day it'll be gone. Like, so the ability to shift while maintaining your approach, your vision, maybe the term is less approach, but vision. Either you have a vision or you have a practice. And I think the key progressively is to be able to adjust your practice to your vision. And I think in that sense, I was maybe a little early in that kind of thing. For me, the vision was always what's important, not really the practice. And it was hard at times. I mean, I had to, and I still have this sort of stigma. There's the stigma of like the jack of all trades type of thing, master of none. This stigma is very deep, and it's something that is embedded in people my generation so deeply. And it's awful. I mean, and it's moronic, of course, but it's there, and I think that really, but it's interesting because even in the words themselves, jack of all trades, you're talking about trades, not talking about, an artistic vision. You're talking about literal trade. So I think this notion of jack of all trade and the stigma with that is very much related to a specific perception of practices according to skills, to a trade, to a specific kind of practice, but that is less and less relevant. So I think really what happened with me is that I started feeling that very early on, and when I started, I did skateboarding, graffiti. Then I went to art school. I did, and even before that, I started doing zines for a political thing, like group at what you call that? the local kind of, alt left sort of activists in my town, and we were doing zines. That was before I went to art college. Then I stayed in publishing. I was very interested in publishing. It's because all the background in skateboard zines and especially graffiti zines that were the main media for a very long time. So I got into publishing very early on as well. I started Bleu magazine and November magazine pretty much, well, for the most part before I started tattooing. And that got me into tattooing. And then I got into, watches and da-da-da. So like for me, I always felt all of those things were done as a continuous effort to bring new pieces to the puzzle, or to build this vision, to build this image of my vision. And so I think if anything, what I would say is that it's important, even if it doesn't feel very natural to a person, and tattooing in particular has this, it's so encompassing as an experience. It's your eyes, it's your ears, all senses, it's your body, it's obviously, you have, like, it's so complete in terms of experience that it's hard when you finish tattooing. It's hard. Like, I mean, the thing I hate the most is still having to take photos or try to film while I'm tattooing and then edit and then post. I just, I really wish I didn't have to do all that. And I know how hard it is. And it's hard for me who does it, who actually enjoys in also doing it and is able to do it. So I can imagine how it'd be very hard to a person for whom it's not second nature or easy. But that said, I think it's very important to keep an open mind and stay, keep a bit your ear to the ground and be able to like see how things are, and then try. I have to say, when I look at people who might be in their 50s, or like tattooists today in 2024, 25, tattooists who might be in their 40s and 50s, say 50s, I'm in my 40s. Those people belong to a different generation. How they are now managing their lives as seasoned, beyond seasoned tattooists in their 50s or 60s, that is irrelevant to what I will experience in 10, 15 years. And what I might have to say will be irrelevant to a person who is now in their 20s or early 30s tattooing. That said, there are some pointers that can be given. And I think I have to say, well, the same way, if I look at a general tendency in the world, people don't have just one career anymore in their whole life for most things. And I think it's quite likely that that will apply to tattooing as well. I think the chances that people tattoo for a moment and then try other things are pretty high. And the more people will have kept their ear to the ground, as I was saying earlier, and kept a sort of vision-based approach rather than, a practice-focused approach, the easier it will be for them to shift and at the best possible time, and not when they're cornered to shift, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I mean, that's exactly why I'm doing the podcast. So I agree 100% on what you're saying. And also, like, the content I'm creating, for example, with you right now, is the stuff I didn't want to create myself, because I didn't know how to create good content a few years ago. And then I digged in and I realized, okay, what is it that I really want to do with my art? What is my unfair advantage that where I know, okay, no one's doing that. And I wanted to offer also high quality content online with other people, because I think like exchanges were missing when I started the project, which was like straight after Corona. Now, my next question is going to be about the network. You established an impressive network over all the years. How important do you think networking it is in industries like tattooing and designs?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And that is something I think it ties in. So you're asking two questions. You say in tattooing and in design. I think there's two slightly different answers. For me, that's two separate questions. Um, but it does tie in as well to some extent with what I was saying earlier about the ecosystems in respective industries. I think it is useful sometimes to compare a thing that is relatively uncharted and often not very well understood, like tattooing, and to compare it to other practices uh, can be useful for some things. And so I'm going to do exactly this. Um, Tattooing is a very quintessentially social thing in the sense that you cannot tattoo without being in a relationship with a person, entering a relationship with a person. In that regard, it is quite comparable to psychotherapy, for example. The ability to enter a relationship, set rules, boundaries, expectations, use this relationship as a foundation to achieve a different goal, and then wrap it up, close the relationship, and and yeah, close it. That kind of 3-part cycle is crucial to the outcome. The outcome is very multifaceted. There's emotional aspects, there's visual aspects, there's all kind of things. But whatever the outcome might be, the ability of a person to manage that, of an artist, of a professional, to manage that is crucial. So the social skills, the interpersonal skills of a tattoo artist are very crucial. It's like if you're again, like I tried skateboarding. No, I've skateboarded for a very long time and I was decent at it, but I'm heavy. I'm tallish and I'm heavy. I don't have a body type. Of course, there's a couple skateboarders who are great, who are taller, but for the most part, most skateboarders don't have this kind of physique. I could very quickly see people who could, jump, ollie, just do, fly over stairs, whatever, and, fall and not hurt themselves too badly. When I did, if you're half my weight or my weight, that makes a huge difference. Tattooing is the same. Most practices, it's not just about what happens in your brain and just your soul. The reality of just your physical being is relevant. It's not the only thing, but it's relevant. With tattooing, there's some aspects that a person might have, unlike skateboarding or unlike other practices. The amount of different aspects that come into play is extremely wide, and a person can choose what they focus on. There's a lot of different things that can make you a good tattoo artist, even if other things are not that great. But they cannot be mediocre. You need to be decent at most of the different aspects. You need to be able to, have a decent eyesight, probably. Well, obviously you can have glasses, but you need to have a decent amount of strength. You need to have a certain level of coordination. You need to have a certain, all of those things. And then there's creative skills. You need to have a decent level in illustration and And then there's a lot of wiggle room. If you're not a very, strong, tall person, well, you can use lighter tools, and there's there's still more wiggle room than in most other professions. That said, there's a limit. And the other way around, like I have big hands, there's certain areas on the body that I hate. I don't hate, but I know are particularly challenging for me because I just don't know where to place my hands. And someone who with smaller hands would do better. Like, necks, for example, is very hard for me to tattoo. So those things are relevant. What I'm getting at with that is that one aspect that is relevant is one's ability to communicate and be tuned into the world, especially the culture, and to understand how they position, where they want to be, and how. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And earlier as well, I used the expression keep your ear to the ground. I think that applies to most cultural practices, but it expresses itself in very different ways depending on what you do. Some type of practices, work well being extremely isolated in your studio and only talk to like art critiques or like Some other things require to be, anyway, there's a few different ways to be in connection to the world around you. But the networking for me was always my way to keep that ear to the ground and to understand my position in the world, and to continue to also check myself. That was my way to make sure that if I messed up or if I did something relevant, well, I would also quickly get a signal that people, didn't connect with it for a reason or another. So it was less about quantity than quality. Networking for me came as a natural extension to just a friend group, a peer group. And then all of a sudden you become a bit more like public person, and then it expands. But if you notice as well, my network, my audience, I don't know if you differentiate between those or if you mean like them together, but also I'm fine being relatively polarizing. I'm not private with my opinions. I'm not with political opinions or whatever. I'm not chasing just mass approval. It's about truly a mix of friend group, focus group, and a very bilateral, a very bidirectional relationship to the people that I produce things for. I don't, because I grew up, for many reasons. That's the best way I found to have a social life. In a lot of ways, I don't, I've always had challenges with more traditional type of friendship and relationships. I have my own thing going on with that, in terms of neurodivergence, and it's fine. I learned to navigate, to navigate it, and I found a certain peace and a certain solution in this kind of thing, which is probably as well why graffiti. This is where for me, I tattooed. I approached tattooing very much the way I did graffiti. It was a message. It was a sort of interaction with the world. It wasn't a unidirectional thing. When you do graffiti, you don't, sure, a lot of people will see it, but you really do it for your peers. It's not like for anonymous people who just, you do it for your peers, and the peers will, there's people you vibe with, people you don't, you might be beefing with or whatever, but you know who they are, they identify themselves to you, They will, tell you what they think, whether it's good or bad, and you enter this type of thing, and so you keep putting out artwork, putting out things, and for people to react, and you have this almost proxy for social interaction of your art, which is quite different from what is usually the case in visual arts, contemporary art, or music, where it's much more one-directional type of thing, where you just like put things out, people consume it. Of course, there's a little bit of feedback, but it's often mediated through so many people, so many different layers of, again, like, your Spotify data and the money you make, and your manager who tells you, no. And so at the end of the day, most of the musicians and the artists I know, they're not that in touch with their audience, not in the way that tattooists are. And so for me, networking was always this kind of thing, and I like it. It's fine. It's the best way I found to exist in the world.
And I was like, it's interesting that you brought the part with the customers, because this was not what I was asking. So I'm really glad you jumped on that. So talking about the professional network and like the people that you created these groups with, like to create the collaborations, etc. I mean, these are your people then. Like, you don't really spend time with traditional friends, as you were saying.
Yeah, I never really had those. I always, yeah, I never had friend groups like that. I have a few specific friends, but I'd never had friend groups. It was always part of something I would do, like, again, like skateboarding or tattooing or, graffiti or projects like the watches or the typefaces. So yeah, I was never great with just the traditional like friend thing.
But you see the higher purpose then, because like you don't want to hang out just to hang out, and you want to do something great with the person. This is something I really do identify with as well.
Yeah, I think I would be lying if I said it's intentional. It's more that I'm unable to. It's of course I don't like it. I find it, very quickly, I find it irritating if I'm around people and I don't see, a point to the hangout. But really, it's also that I'm clearly missing, I'm also clearly unable to find the same reward in those kind of basic interactions that, most people do. It's not that I for the lack of trying, is that there's just something that doesn't
It just
connect.
doesn't work.
In
No, I
the-
agree.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that? I'm exact same. And since I started the project and the podcast, and like doing everything I'm doing, and like I just keep meeting so interesting people, I just like get bored so quick by, let's call them, normal people. How do you deal with that?
Well, by becoming a tattooist, I think it. That's how I dealt with it. And the other thing that I like, that is meaningful and to me is family. So for me, the friends I have, I essentially consider them family, and then I have this sort of. But for me, I don't like the one thing that I wouldn't want to. I don't want to make it look like I'm trying to. For me, tattooing is not a job. It's not a profession. It's not a business. It's an expression of me. It's like a direct emanation of me. So if people engage with that, of course I have to still earn a living, and I want to earn a decent living, but I would also tattoo for free if I could. So I think it's important. So for me, I think there's a broader sense. Like for me, that's what culture is. That is, it can be tattooing, it can be sharing music, it can be these types of things. I can interact socially, and it's not even a proxy. It's a space. Like it's like some people might go to a pub to interact. My space is culture. Do you know what I mean?
I do. It's very interesting. But I think like jumping back on what you said earlier about this whole having a relationship with your peers, hanging out with tattoo artists, with other creatives, creating things, and this is something I'm finally enjoying after my like this is yet now the fourth tattoo studio I'm working in, and I finally have the feeling that I arrived somewhere where adults are working, where there is no concurrence. It's just like everyone is established, having a good time and like exchanging. But it's also about the fact that it's not a traditional tattoo shop. Like there is no 30%, there is a rent system. And the owner, Adria, which I'm very grateful for, she's really impressive because like he really gives the feeling that you are a person. He sees you as a person, as an artist, and he wants you to grow. And like through you, the shop grows as well. And I ask myself this question, like from your perspective, what are the biggest mistakes to avoid as a tattoo shop owner, and what advice would you give to young tattoo artists dreaming of opening their own studios? Because nowadays we see that the scene is evolving with many private spaces opening, traditional studios kind of close somehow. Like everyone is, as you said before, making money for themselves. Because like in a traditional way of working, there is, I mean, this is an open question. We can talk about it for hours, but there is a certain abuse of the artist and for the profit of a person, of the owner. And from my experience, owners, in my experience, again, not very kind, gonna put it like this. So what are the mistakes to avoid, like the do's and don'ts for tattoo studios?
Well, it's different. It's hard to put it in universal terms, but I can definitely say a few things that I observed for myself, and they are very much related to my own flaws or personality traits as well. And I will try from that to build slightly more general kind of considerations. I think first and foremost, the main mistake I made, and the reason why eventually I decided to, at least for a moment, step away from studio ownership, is to not have been precise enough, or to I think I was not clear enough with what I wanted out of the situation. There was a vision, and it worked at times. It worked extremely well at times, and it worked not well in other times. And I think I always drew conclusions and learned from each experience. But I think to go too quickly and to not be prepared well enough, and to not be intentional enough with what a person wants to get out of a tattoo studio. And that would apply from anything, from commercial studio to a small, like, experimental DIY thing. Know what you want, because what I was about to start with, and then I decided to start with what I just said. I was about to say, oh, I made mistakes surrounding me with the wrong people, which I did at times, and that affected me deeply. I was incredibly, I was extorted, I was stolen from, I was my trust was, abused to levels that, like, are unbelievable. But I think if I had been more precise with what I wanted, and the worst thing is that I kind of saw it coming always. Like, I was almost never, not never, but almost never surprised with who I had issues with. But what is interesting is if I really think about it, it could have been avoided, or it could have been ended in not me being abused, but a kind of a more even, fair kind of outcome if I had been more precise. Because I did see, like, the people who took the most advantage or simply were, really toxic or stupid people or selfish or whatever. It's not like I didn't see it. It's just that I didn't know what to do with it. And I, if I had had a better sense of exactly what worked and how to achieve my vision as far as a tattoo studio is concerned, I would have simply either declined to deal with those people, or I would have kept a very precise space for them until, until that didn't work anymore. And I would have not protected myself, but I would set up something much more precise where they could fit in. And if they couldn't fit in, then they would have gone. So I think it's about being deliberate. And what is interesting is, for me, I've also had amazing success with my studios in a lot of different ways. I never made money with my studios. There was never, what I got from making studios was to not pay someone else money. That's the thing. But I never actually took money from the studios. So money was never a point. The point was to create the best context for me. And I think ultimately, if I think of it, when it worked best was when I was the clearest about this, and when I was also the most honest about it as well. Because I think a mistake I made was, I wouldn't necessarily say lack of honesty. It's more now that I realize. But I think I probably also misled people by not explaining clearly what I was trying to do with the studios, and not following through enough, because I wanted to be nice, or I wanted to be welcoming or whatever. And this is where like the whole issue that I have with this is where it is tricky when you're like me and don't necessarily have this more structured perception of who are friends, who is, just peers, Like, you have someone who's coming to me, like, telling me, oh, that's so cool, I wouldn't be part of that. I'm like, oh, cool, you want to be my friend. But no, they don't want to be my friend. They're just, and if that had been clear from the beginning for myself, then also I would have been clearer to those people. I would have felt in a much more kind of clear way about situations, and I would have been able to react. So I think what is interesting is that the times I have been the clearest about all of this led to amazing successes. The LA studio, I had to close it because the rent was too high. And then, I had just moved to the East Coast, and the landlords kept raising the rent, and I looked for 6 months. I was looking for a different space. I couldn't find it. I had just moved here. But for me, the LA studio has been one of the most amazing achievements of my entire life as a studio owner. And you know what? At the end of when we closed, artists, it wasn't a rent kind of based type of thing, but I think people gave 20%. And honestly, like, most months we didn't pay the bills, but I didn't care. It was like, it felt like a true emanation of my vision. But not only, and this is what felt so amazing, is that it felt that each person there had a pivotal role in what that thing was. It was like a baby, that a large group of people had made together. And and everything was very clear, and yeah, and it was beautiful, but also like, so, and same with London, in a very different style, but I think London also is a very different type of success, in that sense. So I think being clear is one, about what a person wants in a studio, and making sure that it's clear for the people who approach you. Take it or leave it. There's like so many different styles, especially today. There's so many different type of places. The one way to be fair on everyone is just to be like, look, you want a busy commercial studio where you will be gauged out of your money, but also you don't have to worry. You have like, managers, assistants, clients every day, and you give 40%, 50%. That's that. You want to be in a DIY thing where everyone, chips in, and and you have that. And the day, your a person is not vibing anymore and needs to dissolve and start something else, you have that as well, and anything in between. So I think truly the definitely do is be clear for yourself. Once you're clear for yourself, you can be clear for the others, and make sure to convey that. And there is such a thing as agreeing to disagreeing. It's fine, and yeah, and the second thing is just to bear in mind, especially today, that what is relevant, what is working for a little while, for a few months, for a few years, might stop working, and it's not a failure. It's just the time changing. Your priorities might change, and you need to expect that it will happen. It's that not happening that would be more surprising. So I think studios either need to reinvent themselves, but that's the thing. Like, it's already hard to navigate for one person. So imagine navigating the evolution of the culture in the industry for a group of people, like, and finding that, those the common denominators for a group of people is even harder. It's already hard for one person. So of course, the chances that a studio will just work forever are almost non-existent, and I think you need to just accept it from the beginning. So yeah, that, or at least, or be ready to change drastically, to go from, so Ensemble London, my first, baby studio, well, currently is run by someone else, is actually owned by someone else, by Jenny, who's my OG collaborator there, one of my favorite people, and someone I trust, but who's running it like a street shop, and it's great. It's still Bleu. It still is the extension of that. It's a very mature place. London 2025 is not London 2015 or 2012. There's been Brexit. There's been all kind of crisis. The prices are different. The tattoos made in London are different. It's a different studio. Is it still Bleu? Yes, in many ways, but is it very different from the Bleu I created in 2014? Then yeah, it's drastically different, and that's normal. That's how it can still be there. And me, I'm more than perfectly happy. It's an achievement for me that it can still be there, run the way it is run, and with the amazing team we have now, some people that I know well, some people that I hardly know at all, and I get to go once a year. But it's amazing to think, for me, that this thing can continue to exist without me being the beating heart of it. That is an achievement. That is telling me that my vision can exist. It's not just me. It can continue to exist, and it is an achievement in itself, and it's something that I got to a point where it was very clear. But was I always clear about it? Certainly not. So I think that's that is definitely the thing for me, and it applies to my own tattooing as well. I think having studios, opening studios, managing studios, running studios, also distracted me for a long time from my own tattooing, from my own practice, and there was a point where I realized that's what I'm the best at. Some people run amazing studios and they're great at it. Me personally, where I think I can bring something, make the world better, or at least really bring something that no one can, is the tattoos I do and the time I spend with my clients in my private studio that looks the way I want. And is there a world where I will again open a studio, possibly in New York, possibly next year? For sure, if the right stars align. But for now, this is the best I can bring to the world is this, and I'll let other people who do other things really well, the music, the skateboarding, that's for other people to do. Running studios, that's for other people to do as well. So I think not being honest, it's hard to know. There isn't really a formula. Of course, you can make educated guesses in terms of whether it's the right thing for you, but no one can tell you for sure. Just give it a shot, and don't be an asshole.
And looking back, is there anything you wish you would know at the start of your career that would have made a difference along the way?
That's a very good question. No, I don't think so. I think it's I think if you asked me that 2 or 3 years ago, I might have said yes. But like right now, I have managed to, I think I've managed to take everything I've done from, before I went to art college, I studied psychology at university. Like I went to art college, I studied graphic design, and then, I did publishing. And so I did a lot of different things, but on a daily basis, not even a weekly basis, on a daily basis, I can point out things I do during the day that I learned through any of those things. And I can tell you, graphic design is the obvious one because I'm working on a computer and I'm constantly using some tools, but also some notions. But then, psychology or anything else. So I think no, not really. I mean, there's certain things that I could know that would make things even better for me. Maybe the only thing, I'll tell you the one thing that I wish I knew, and that's relatively new. I didn't realize how so as soon as I started coming to the US, started working in New York, it was amazing. It was the best place for me to tattoo. It was incredible. It was like, it worked out so well. I was like, the US, that's that for me. Of course, there's some things that certain aspects I miss about Europe when it comes to tattooing. But for the most part, this is where you're the most empowered as an artist, the more appreciated, the more, supported. It's amazing. That said, so 2 years ago, we moved to Connecticut. Again, like to someone who doesn't live in New York or in Connecticut, it might not be obvious, but living in Connecticut is like living in, I don't know, like South End or, in London or, just it's literally, it's just there. Like it's the greater New York kind of area. That said, it's still a different state and a different counties. I never fully expected or even considered that the perception of tattooing could be so drastically different outside of big, New York, San Francisco, LA, like metropolitan, outside of the cities per se in the US. And especially on the East Coast, as soon as you're out of, New York or Boston or like the big cities, the laws and the culture, but even simply the laws are such that a lot of places have actual bans on tattooing and completely forbid tattooing. And that, I didn't expect that. And I have to say, this year I had a huge issue where I opened a studio in a town called Port Chester, New York, where, I called the administration to find out the health and safety department, to find out about the rules and legal aspects. And the people we talked to seemed to be like, give us only sort of half answers. They were like, oh yeah, no, you're fine. There's nothing special. We're like, okay, well, just expected that it would be the same as in New York, pretty much. Anyway, long story short, I worked for a couple months, and then I got a letter essentially explaining that tattooing is just illegal in Portchester, and that's after setting up the whole shop, like 2 years of saving up, pouring my entire life into setting this up. I was so happy. I was just like, awesome. Let's do this now. And that was really awful. Yeah, it was a very, very, very bad moment in my adult life. After, like the amount of sacrifice I made to have this place, etc. So I had to leave. I had to, there was nothing I could do. And now, I work privately. It's fine. But I have to say, I mean, the really what I can do, I mean, it's manageable. But I have to say, what I'm realizing is that, like it really feels like being in the 90s again, kind of. And we really, less than an hour drive from New York, about an hour drive, which is, you could be in Brooklyn and have to drive more. You can be farther, in Brooklyn. But it seems like we sort of back in time, much farther in time, than in space, on that level. And I have to say, like, if anything, I would have maybe considered other places to move into, if I knew the extent of that. But also, I'm taking it as I don't know, as just a destiny thing. I think it's interesting. I'm meeting a lot of people. There's also like other artists and peers in this area who are obviously sharing this situation and who can, use more people bringing a new perspective on tattooing is. So I see it as my, little signal that there's still work to do. There's amazing artists. And yeah, like, I mean, and we love life here, so it's not all bad. But I have to say, I kind of wish not that it would have changed the decisions, but I wish at least I had known, and I would have like spared myself the Portchester experience. I would have like spent my time differently. But it is what it is, and that's the only thing. Otherwise, I'm a very sort of pragmatic and fatalist person. I'm healthy. I have healthy kids. I can pay the bills. I don't need a lot more. Yeah.
I have to ask how, like, I've heard other podcasts of you, like when I did my research, and like, of course, I'm following your work since years. How was it the moment when Virgil Abloh had put Sans Bleu magazine in Kanye West's hands? And how was the whole experience of that led then to you to tattooing Adam Port and the whole club context thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, and I'll answer honestly. I wish. Well, no, I did get to express it, but I'll be honest. It was not. It's really retrospectively that I'm like, oh wow, that was interesting. When that happened, I mean, I didn't really care so much. It was. I think it's quite this interesting thing of how time changes the perspective on things, because, well, I mean, I love music and rap in particular. I've been listening to it since, 89. So that's really how deep it runs. But also, I'll be honest, I was never, I mean, I was not a Kanye West fan. I was, it was not the kind of music I was listening to. And I, I only, I have a history of just really focusing on what I like, and the rest I don't care so much. When Virgil approached me, he was, just a guy who was helping Kanye. Like no one really knew about him. So, so, but what is interesting is that it belonged to a moment of my life that was very, very particular and pivotal in a lot of ways. And so the work I did with them, the whole thing, that was a couple of years, I want to say. And even if immediately it didn't really, it felt quite organic and a bit random or whatever, but also quite quickly it did feel as part of a much bigger thing that I was part of, and that was a big moment. It for myself and for my friends and it was like London around 2014, 2015. It was a really good moment for London in general. A lot of amazing music, a lot of amazing fashion, a lot of amazing people happening, there. And I was part of that. So it did feel like something really special as a whole. But it was one thing. It was one of a multitude of things happening around those times that did feel like a big deal. Um, and retrospectively, obviously, certain people become this sort of signifier for the whole time because they're more prominent people. Virgil became, really famous. Kanye always was. But really, for me, it was maybe less important, like, than what was going on with some of my friend group. And there was a time, I would, my friends were, uh, Grace, for example, who was my flatmate, Grace Ladoja, who's has now a big talent and general like marketing agency in London. And then there's people like Irene and Sharmadine and Twigs and that's on the side of not the tattoo people. And it was the era of Palace sort of blowing up. um I was also still tattooing closely with Liam Sparks, and Liam was opening his shop. And we would have people like Frank Ocean come to tattoo or get tattooed at Bleu. Um uh and Skepta was having a sort of renaissance moment. And then fashion brands like Cutweiler were like really having a moment. And so I think it was a very specific, a very particular moment that was really a moment in the culture. um and what happened with Kanye and Virgil was just an emanation of that moment. The reason why they were in London, and yeah, like, and so, or A-Side and Tremaine were like started to work together, and Benji B, who also went on to work with Virgil at Louis Vuitton, was amazing. All in my friend group, Tremaine was recently creative director for Supreme, not anymore. But like, you know, very important today in the fashion world. A-Side is in LA, opened a restaurant recently. That was really the sort of community I was part of, and it was a big moment for that specific time. And then that was the time there was Pigalle in Paris. Who else? Like, it was still kind of peak, Colette and like peak, maybe not peak anymore for like, in fashion, it was sort of just a moment after Riccardo Tisci was at Givenchy and really started the whole like luxury streetwear thing that blew up after that. And my friend the late Gary Warnett, rest in peace. But I think really the point is that there was a very important moment happening in London at the time. I think it really, when I think of the Kanye West thing, it's really more like a signifier of this specific moment in history that I think was amazing. But to me, that it was more like a consequence of the zeitgeist and that energy that was going on in London at the time, rather than it was a result rather than a cause in that sense. And I mean, retrospectively, I'm glad I got to see that. I'm glad retrospectively I got to experience that. It was interesting and inspiring, but it's, as I said, it was more the result of something bigger. But also, it did play a role in just as a sort of name dropping, as a sort of cosign, getting the cosign of Kanye at the time, and Virgil to some extent, but Kanye in particular, was pivotal in, I think, me getting the job and being approached by Hublot, and which in turn became a crucial thing in my life. So I think, be it for that, it definitely had a pretty important effect.
It played a role. Yeah. Okay. And how did that tattoo thing with FKA Twigs come up?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Twigs since 2012, probably. Probably even before. I met her through Carrie Munden, cassette player, and Jason Farrow, who were good friends. Well, I met Carrie through Jason, who was fashion editor for Bleu magazine in the late 2000s, and then I met Twigs through Carrie. So yeah, I've known her since 2010 probably, and yeah, just like on and off, kind of. She asked me to, do things, and we stayed in touch, and yeah, it's just very organic. It's just like people. I think it's just people who respect and appreciate each other, kind of, and who stay faithful to that kind of friendship.
Which becomes rare somehow nowadays, I think.
I agree. It's something I value very much. And I think that does tie in as well a little bit with what I was saying about the tattoo studios. I think opening tattoo studios, I was hoping to essentially have, I considered my teams would be more like crews, in the like friend groups or graffiti crews. That's how I approached setting up tattoo studios. And this is where, when I realized that people weren't team players or crew members, then, that's where I could have told them, like, look, that's not the right place for you. But I agree. I think there's a fake, and I have to insist on the fact that it's fake. I think that social media and digital industry, with things like not all of them, but a majority of what is presented as business solutions, like, Shopify and like these kinds of things, give a fake sense of people's ability to take their business in their hands and give a fake sense that what used to require a much more tangible community around you and a much more tangible network and human relational structure around you back in the day, well, pre-digital, can now be just replaced by a random marketplace that present itself like it's just going to be the end all be all of your, anything you need to do with commerce. And it's never the truth. But unfortunately, people are drinking the Kool-Aid, on this and forgetting that really, those tools are only as good as they are, and they're all good, but you need to not listen to the pitch, to the marketing pitch. You need to really look at them for what they truly are, and only give them the give them the role that they can truly have, and continue to value those things. I have to say, what saves me from bitterness and it is the fact that I have people like that in my life. That most of those people I mentioned before, and dozens of others that, from Emmanuel, who's my business partner in Swiss Typefaces, he's, graffiti buddy from the 2000s. So many people from the Son Bleu magazine era, who supported and on many different levels and connected with me, I'm still in touch with. And when there's an opportunity or thing, they connect, and then we still, and I think seeing that it is possible, it exists, people value this, the fact that it still exists is all I need to hang on and not lose faith.
But I also think that you learn to read between the lines with time. And this is something you gotta go through a few bad experiences to be able to read through these lines.
Yeah. I mean, people have different levels of abilities to read between the lines. I think, unfortunately, I have a harder time than other people sometimes to read between the lines. And that's why I need time to demonstrate how involved, how serious people are in the friendships and the support. And I mean, it might be a hip hop thing, like in me. I like shouting people out because I think it's important, and I have the list of people I would like to shout out is too long. But I have to say, in the tattoo world, I'm thankful to have had people like Liam Sparks, Thomas Hooper, Alex Binney, my friend Basile from Switzerland. There's still so many people also back home in Switzerland who childhood friends that I'm still vibing with, and I might have not talked to them in a decade, and there's still, and all of a sudden, if one hits the other one up, then they're still there, and it's beautiful. But I think I have a hard time gauging how serious a person is until I can see that 10, 15, 20 years later they're still there. It's a beautiful thing. Since we're doing the podcast, I could shout out Fuzi Stan, who's that I did a really cool podcast with during COVID, and who's also like an absolute OG. We featured him in the third issue of Son Bleu, and he was just beginning to tattoo a guy called Simon, who was one of my students actually at the art school I was teaching at, and a graffiti writer as well. Was like, oh yeah, that's that guy, and I knew Fuzi from graffiti, but I mean, of him, But then we got in touch through Simon and David, who's now that David is now doing Maximage, a design studio in Switzerland, and then we did something for the magazine, for Bleu, no, issue 3 on stands, flash and tattooing, and then I always stayed in touch with Fuzi and did this thing, and I appreciate him so much. Like, he's been a huge inspiration in his like not giving any fucks kind of approach to the whole thing, but being really true and really faithful to his vision. So I think in some ways I'm enjoying how the time now is almost, the triage is so intense that the people who have this kind of presence, have this kind of mentality, become even more obvious. Do you know what I mean? And that for me means so much. Like, that's all that's all I need. I don't need, for example, like, last summer, one of my literal oldest friends, Yero, that I've known from being a kid in Switzerland, maybe around 9-10 years old, came to visit. I hadn't seen him in like over a decade, probably. He was also doing graffiti, and we were in the Zulu Nation together. We did a lot of stuff in the early 2000s, early 2000s. And then he did his thing. But that was amazing, and that is one of the things I appreciate the most about being my age and getting to this kind of place in life where I get to reconnect and get to really see that.
Your time being the most valuable assets you do have, how do you know, okay, this is the person I want to give my time to or not, especially after so many years?
Well, you don't really. You have to just, and that ties in as well again with all my my rant about the tattoo studios. I think what I did do, at least, is that I sort of promised myself to not let people hurt me in some ways. Like, I knew that even if I wanted to stay vulnerable to some extent. I was okay with a certain amount of bad experiences for the sake of all the good experiences. And if people took advantage, then that's because I wanted to stay generous with my time, my love, my, the money that was being made and whatnot. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. You're going to steal from me. Like, a person was stealing, literally, like in Zurich, the manager for 2 years stole money from the company, like, until, we found out about it. I mean, it's crazy. It's like what? Like, a person you talk to every week, and you realize this person's been like, cheating you, like, for years, not for like a moment and then leave, like, for years. It's wild. And, am I fine? 100%. Am I doing better than any of those? Yeah, absolutely. And and so as long as, and I'm fine. I'm fine with the mistakes as long as I'm doing me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm fine. It's okay. I'll protect my health. I protect my family, of course. I protect others. Me, I'm resilient as fuck. I'm focused. I have the position I have. I'm privileged. I'm good. And ultimately, the what happened, with my studio in Portchester, that affected me more than any bad experiences with individuals. Do you know what I mean? That was because that's something where really it was something I couldn't control, and frankly that affected me beyond what I what I was prepared to be affected at. It was a blind spot. I had been blindsided entirely, and that, you know what I'm saying. But any other things, like whatever, you know. So yeah, I think. But again, and one thing that's very important as tattoo artists, I think one thing that I was lucky, one thing that I can sort of credit myself for as pivotal for my, well, success and longevity, is that